we also find that there's other factors that promote people to speak up frequently, in addition to just a dispositional characteristic like extroversion. If you're in an environment that feels psychologically safe, that can encourage people to feel like they can speak up and take risks.
Welcome to the Tippie Leads podcast. Stories from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business that will change the way you work and lead. Produced by the Tippie Leadership Collaborative. I'm your host, Nick Westergaard. I teach at Tippie and lead our Story Lab program. This podcast provides another opportunity to share stories from Tippie with our community and beyond. Each season of Tippie Leads, we focus on a grand challenge in today's changing world of work. This season, we're looking at risk. We've explored risks like natural disasters, political shifts, and the challenges entrepreneurs face. But sometimes, risks are more personal, like the fear of speaking up at work. In our final episode this season, we start with Tippie's Daniel Newton, who shares insights on how employees can overcome the fear of speaking up and how leaders can create a culture that encourages open communication. Then Tippie undergrad Callie Willham reflects on her journey with public speaking and how facing that fear helped her grow. It's a reminder that personal risk can lead to powerful transformations. And finally, we'll bring it all together with a final tip-e just for you. Ready? Let's get started. Daniel Newton is an associate professor of management and entrepreneurship at the Tippie College of Business. His research on employee engagement has been published in numerous academic journals. A recipient of an 8-year NASA grant, Newton has conducted research with astronauts aboard the International Space Station, isolated crews in Houston, and cosmonauts in the Mars training facility in Moscow. Daniel Newton, I'm thrilled to be talking to you again. You kicked off season 1 of Tippie Leads talking about productivity tips for astronauts or from astronauts. And now we're back talking about to speak up at work or not. So chart the path for us first in your work of productivity, how we work over to voice at work.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be back, Nick. So thank you for bringing me back for another round of this, and just loved talking to you before. And for me, I really try to look at what makes people like be at their best at work. And some of that is just being highly engaged, highly motivated. And a way in which we can do that is have a voice. When we feel like we can make a difference, when we have suggestions that are incorporated and implemented, we feel like the organization is a bit ours, right? Because we're making it better for us and for others. And so just looking at these broad topics are things that are really interesting to me. And so happy to be back talking about this time voice. And so thank you for bringing me.
Now, as we think about our voice at work, I think sometimes we have that hang up internally and think that there may be people that are just naturally better at this than I am. But are there certain types or personality types that are more predisposed to being better, bringing their voice to work with them?
There are, but I would say that's not the majority of the explanation. And so, for example, people that are extroverted are more likely to speak up. They're naturally disposed to want to talk more. And people that are introverted just talk less. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean that extroverts have better ideas. It's just that they seek out those social situations more frequently. But we also find that there's other factors that promote people to speak up frequently, in addition to just a dispositional characteristic like extroversion. Some of these are felt responsibility. If people feel responsible for work obligations, they're going to want to speak up. And that doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Or if you're in an environment that feels psychologically safe, that can encourage people to feel like they can speak up and take risks, say things that are going to rock the boat a little bit. And so there's environmental and kind of attitude factors that also influence whether people speak up or not.
So if there's other factors, why is it hard for us? Why do we bring so much baggage to it feels like a very, very big, very hard thing to do often, and a lot of risk associated with it as well.
Exactly. And I think some of it is there's this notion of the status quo bias that when we're suggesting changes, even if they're really good changes that would make the organization better for us or for others, if there's a problem that needs to be resolved, that can be hard because it cuts against the status quo. And as humans, we tend to want to stick with the status quo. And there's some classic studies like with organ donation in Europe or with 401k contributions in the US. And these were studies done 20 years ago in Science and other journals, just highlighting that we tend to stick with the status quo, and that's what makes speaking up with new ideas really hard. And then there's a host of other reasons, and we can talk about these in more detail, but some of it is we're sensitive as social creatures. We don't want to look stupid, and so we worry about putting a really good idea out there that other people are going to judge us, and other people are going to be like, oh, come on, really, you suggested that? But those are maybe the types of ideas that we want to have. We may feel like we're too new at work, right? I just got here, like I'm just trying to make sure I fit in and don't like rock the boat at all. But newcomers often have super valuable perspectives, but they shy away from sharing those because they don't quite understand all the expected norms of the current workplace. And so these and other worries kind of hold us back from speaking up, which is too bad. And so that's been so much of my research is like, how can we overcome some of these barriers, and maybe what are like specific skills or specific ways in which we can speak up to overcome these things.
Well, and you talk a lot about rehearsing speaking
Hmm.
up. Would you I wonder if you'd say more about that and other strategies for feeling empowered to speak up at work?
Yeah, and so typically voice research has looked at voice at work. It says you're speaking up about a work-related idea or work-related suggestion, and we've kind of compartmentalized it to work. And so a study that some colleagues and I are doing is what happens if people speak up outside of work about work topics in an effort to rehearse them and kind of talk through them with somebody else before it gets to prime time. And what we found, and this was a study of romantic partners, and so when individuals spoke up to their partner about an idea they had at work, that it not only gave them more confidence, but they were more committed to the idea. And actually, the idea improved in quality. So there's something about talking through this with someone else. And then the person was more likely to speak up the next day about that idea. And I think the same thing could go with coworkers or other people at work, that when we want to say something that maybe rocks the boat, or we have an idea that we want to pitch to our manager, maybe run it by somebody else. And they may say, like, do you know what, just let that one go. Or they may say, this is really important. Let me kind of walk in there with you, right? Or maybe think about this or this. And then sometimes just the act of vocalizing things helps us to process the idea a little bit, but it can also help us in a bunch of other ways. Like I mentioned, we're more committed, higher quality, and we actually feel more confident as well. And so just rehearsing the idea is so critical. And really this gets, Nick, to the point of having others involved in the voice process. There's recent research on what's called voice amplification from Kristen Bain at Rochester and others that highlights that if I say something, that somebody else can amplify what I say and give me credit. And so imagine you're in a meeting and they say, hey, like Daniel said, and then they echo what I said and then maybe expand. But that has benefits not only to the original voicer, but then also the person that amplifies. And so it's not like they're trying to steal the idea, but giving credit to where credit's due. But it also kind of gets a little bit more momentum behind the idea. So there's things such as that amplification that we can do to just really get behind ideas and support other people in what they express at work.
And you touched on this a bit, but the value from the employee perspective, say more about the payoff from speaking up that you can find. You mentioned confidence. What else do we see from employees that speak up?
So the classic voice article or voice research article was published in 1970 by Albert Hirschman, and it highlights essentially that people speak up when they're dissatisfied with something with the status quo. And sometimes that dissatisfaction will cause people to say something, to voice, or to quit. And I really think that there's so many opportunities to improve the organization by voicing. And so I think that's the primary thing for me, is that if things aren't ideal with your work, maybe it's with coworker relationships or customers or whatever it may be, why not say something about it? Why not do something? Why not create awareness and try to make it better? And I think maybe because some of these risks that we've highlighted, people shy away from that, but it could make the workplace better for you and for others. Now, there's other benefits of speaking up, in addition to some of these internalized things like confidence and commitment that I highlighted. But others, coworkers, peers, bosses, see employees who speak up as better performers. They see them as being competent, as being like, whoa, that person knows what they're talking about, as having like high status or like a positive reputation. And so when we speak up with new ideas, things that would make things better for in the organization, others tend to appreciate it, and they value those who go on record with things that would make the organization better for everybody.
So, sticking with that perspective from the management, leadership, organizational perspective, what are the values, or what's the value of having employees that speak up? Because sometimes we could have it in our head from that perspective that it's not a good thing. I've got a lot of people speaking up with a lot of ideas, and it can be overwhelming. But what are the advantages from the organizational perspective?
Absolutely. And what you said at the end, I did a research study where managers essentially felt some of that, where they're just like, can you stop talking? Right? I have so many ideas or so much going on that you speaking up just gives me more work. But it was especially for problems when the people that reported to them were reporting a lot of problems, and the managers felt powerless to do anything. It was overwhelming. And so I can sympathize with managers who are like, I just got to get my job done, and it's just challenging to have all these ideas. But can you imagine an organization where there weren't any ideas? Like the lack of innovation, the lack of learning, the lack of just forward progress. Like, I think having ideas is just a wonderful thing to share learning and knowledge and to make the organization a more creative and innovative place. And I think that learning and transmits, and I know it does. There's plenty of research studies that highlight the value, even for the organization and organizational performance, enhanced performance when individual employees speak up. And so it makes the company better. They perform better. And this has been done with a number of different metrics, including financial metrics, that companies, they can optimize their finances when they're getting ideas from people. And I think this can be people that are, experts, in their chosen function or discipline, but also newcomers. Like, this can be someone that has no idea, but maybe they see things that we don't see. Like, just the human brain is so creative. So why not tap into that to help the workplace be better?
So, speaking of that overwhelm, there's some of that can be felt on the employee side as well. So, how might both parties better approach this with, I don't want to overwhelm you with another idea, but and on the management side of things, addressing some of that, fostering a place where it's okay to bring ideas in and speak up.
And maybe some of this comes back to this notion of psychological safety that I mentioned earlier, just where people feel safe and comfortable. They can speak up without it being held against them and without getting stabbed in the back, for example. Like, I can't believe you said that type of thing. But it's interesting, Nick, like some of these risks that employees think about. Reminds me of an astronaut that I was just debriefing with. And he had mentioned something just in passing, that he didn't feel heard by mission control. And I said, like, well, tell me more. What do you mean you didn't feel heard? And he said they didn't take action, meaning I said something and they didn't fix it. And so I had to say it again and they didn't fix it. Like, they weren't taking action. And I think in that context, it makes a lot of sense. I think in some jobs, that's a little harder that's a hard bar to meet. Meaning, what if a manager gets 7 different ideas and they're at conflict with each other? Surely the manager can't take action that satisfies everybody. That's why being a manager can be difficult. What do you do? Well, I think like good communication is crucial. This psychological safety, this open environment where you say, do you know what? Thank you for that idea. That's a wonderful suggestion. I'll get back to you. And then you circle back with them and say, hey, we could only do a portion version of this, but we can't do it for these reasons. I think so often we don't close the loop with our communication, and employees put ideas out there and it's almost like a black box that they never really know what happens. And they may not have the whole story either. And so circling back and just being forthright in our communication and transparent, I think can just be a tremendous benefit for both employees and managers in reducing some of this noise that comes in speaking up.
Daniel, I was going to say with you, it's always back to the astronauts, but I think that for folks listening that may think that it may be somewhat validating to hear that. Wow, even I mean, I can't imagine but if an astronaut's not feeling heard at work, then maybe I don't feel so bad about me as well. But I do think it comes back to what you said about closing that loop, which gets us back to kind of the leadership perspective of that. The other part of psychological safety is not only creating a place where people want to share, but where they feel heard, and we have to signal that even if we can't exactly take action or show action in a way that they might expect.
Exactly. I completely agree. And there's another study that I recently conducted that looks at like when are managers more likely to I was going to say take the bait to implement the ideas that the employee suggests, and some of that because voice can be this boat rocking behavior, like I suggested, and some of that. A study that I didn't do, another one, just highlights if people are polite, that can be that's really valuable, especially when they are direct with their communication. So sometimes we beat around the bush, but direct communication, we should do X, can be something that managers really resonate with when employees are polite. But also something else I studied was what if employees are a little more indirect? And maybe that's like my personality style. And a lot of people in Iowa or in the Midwest are just highly agreeable and they don't want to call someone on the carpet or they don't want to embarrass anybody. And so sometimes we like sugarcoat our ideas or our voice so much so that people don't even know that it was a suggestion. And what we found was what we termed voice inquiry, where people speak up with a suggestion in the form of a question. Have we thought about X, Y, and Z? And what we found is that managers really like that, and because it makes them feel good, makes them feel powerful, especially when managers are a little bit more dominant, a little. They think that they are the best thing ever. Like speaking up in a little softer way can be a good thing, and maybe managers see this as their idea. But I think that the main message is if we're trying to initiate change, we also have to know our audience. We have to know what's more likely to put a manager on the defensive versus something that they're more likely to accept and run with.
You brought up the regional distinctions, and I do sometimes wonder. We're very proud of the Iowa nice thing, and I don't necessarily think we need to be Iowa mean, but I think sometimes it gets in the way of clear communication and candor at work as well.
I agree, and it's a real challenge, and some of this is complicated just based on like the type of ways in which people speak up. Like if you're highlighting a new idea, typically receivers of those ideas react positively. And that's when you're seeing these effects on reputation and status and likability that I highlighted earlier. But what if it's a problem? That can be really hard, especially if you're agreeable. We were like, hey, this thing is not working, or this is harming people. We should do something about it. That can be really difficult. And because the research would suggest this type of voice highlighting concerns and problems, that managers don't react positively to it. And in fact, other people see you kind of as a complainer. But what we found, a recent study I did with a high-speed, like a light rail system, showed that this type of voice highlighting the problems, concerns, actually is really critical because it leads to urgency, where it's like, oh, I'm going to do something because the building's on fire and I got to like react quickly. In the case of this light rail system, it's like, we have a process where we don't have a process in place for lost children. It's like we just can't deal with this in a month or two from now. Like we're going to have a collection of children like separated from their parents. It's like, no, we need to like deal with this immediately. And so I think sometimes bucking these trends, these things that worry us, like being agreeable and being nice or not getting to the point, we may actually shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes by not getting action taken quickly because of the way in which we frame it or don't frame it.
After hearing from Daniel on how to navigate the risks of speaking up at work, it's clear that overcoming fear can lead to big changes. Tippie undergrad Callie Willham shared her own journey with public speaking at our Spring 2024 Story Lab showcase, reflecting on how facing that fear helped her grow. It's a reminder that even small risks can lead to powerful transformations.
Confidence dictates everything. This is how I started a speech back in high school speech class. I would go on to explain that the key to confidence was self-fulfilling prophecies. A self-fulfilling prophecy is the idea that if you tell yourself you're confident, you believe yourself when you say that, and you do things that confident people do, that you'll become confident. It's basically just fake it till you make it. Now, faking it till you make it was not a new concept for me. I remember a time in middle school on family vacation in Colorado. We were going whitewater rafting, and on the way there, we were weaving through the narrow mountain roads, heading towards the site in my dad's big truck, hauling our camper. And every tight turn we took, I could just imagine us plowing through the guardrails and plummeting to our death. So, when we get to the whitewater rafting site, I'm already pretty nervous. Next, we go and get our seemingly flimsy helmets and life jackets, and we head down for the speech on the beach. This was basically a liability talk, warning us that we can't sue them if we die. So they went on to explain that we could fall off the raft and drown, we could fall off the raft, get trapped under the raft and drown, or we could fall off the raft and hit our head on a rock and die that way. So my nerves are just going up, and I am just not feeling ready for this excursion. So it was to my horror that I found out that we were not going to be connected to this raft at all. There was no straps and no handles for me to hold on to. All we could do was tuck our toes under the seat of the person in front of us. So I not only tucked my toes, but my foot and my ankle and part of my calf under the seat of the person in front of me. And this was extremely uncomfortable. I held this position for the 2 hours on the rapids, clutching my paddle and praying that we wouldn't fall off. Now we go down the rapids and it's going okay, and I'm feeling still a little nervous because I can't look over to my family for a look of reassurance. I'm on the back of the boat. They're all in front of me on the opposite side. So I feel alone and left behind. So as we're about halfway through, the little kid in front of me, who could not have been more than 60 pounds, definitely did not meet the weight restrictions. He starts bouncing around the raft, not putting his toes under the seat of the person in front of him, not holding on to his paddle, and just is so reckless. The guide thinks that this is great, that the kid is having fun, and encourages him to jump off the raft. We were just told how dangerous it is to get off the raft. But he says, no, this is great. He can ride the bull. He can hold on to the hull of the raft and we can spin him in circles and launch him into the nearby water, which was right by the large boulders that could also kill us. So by the end of this excursion, I was just to my limit. I was so nervous and just shoving all those emotions down, holding myself so rigid that I bounced off that boat and headed to the bus that would take us back to our cars. On the bus ride, it was very bumpy, and every bump that we hit just made my muscles ache. I had held myself tight for so long, and I would feel it throughout the rest of that vacation. So as you can tell, in middle school, I was very fear-based. I had to shove my emotions down to a point where I was a robot, and I was so rigid that I would feel it for days to come. So when high school speech class rolled around, I knew that I needed to make confidence my superpower. I was terrified to go to high school speech class, and walking in those doors was very hard every day. So I learned how to shove those emotions down enough so that I still appeared like a person but was still feeling like a robot, and learned to control my heart rate so that I didn't appear nervous in front of my peers. And I managed to get an A+ in that class, even though I was terrified to walk through those doors. So now in college, I still get nervous when talking in front of large groups like this one, but I'm able to acknowledge my feelings and fears, not shove them down, and I'm able to breathe through them. 4 years ago, I ended that speech by saying, "What's stopping you?" AKA, what's stopping you from faking it till you make it? What's stopping you from shoving all your emotions down until you're a robot? And the answer is a lot. So today, I can finally tell you that confidence doesn't dictate everything. Authenticity does. Thank you.
That was Callie Willham, live at our Spring 2024 Story Lab Showcase in downtown Iowa City. You can watch the video of Callie's story and other Tippie storytellers via the link in this week's show notes. Callie was part of our first class through Story Lab back in 2023 and continued to serve as a peer mentor in the program several semesters after. She graduates this spring with a degree in marketing. Congratulations, Callie, and all of our grads. Before we wrap up, let's go back to Daniel Newton one last time for a final tip E for you to remember in your work.
Speaking up can be challenging, and we worry about these risks associated with speaking up. So a recent study I did looked at what happens if we speak up in the form of a question, a little bit more in an indirect manner. And what we found is that speaking up in the form of a question, something to the effect of, have we thought about doing this new process? Or have we considered this thing? That it doesn't challenge managers. Managers don't feel as threatened by this type of indirect voice, voicing in the form of a question. And in fact, instead of feeling threatened, managers feel more valued and they're more likely to endorse that voice. And this effect was especially strong for managers that are a bit more dominant. Maybe we work with those type of people at times who feel like they have to be the smartest person in the room or always have the right answer. And so pitching ideas in the form of a question may be a way to still get our input implemented and enact positive change without rocking the boat and burning bridges.
This season on Tippie Leads, we've explored various types of risks, from big challenges like natural disasters and political shifts to the everyday risks of driving, cybersecurity, and even speaking up at work. We've heard from experts on how to navigate those risks and how personal fears like public speaking can lead to powerful growth. As our season comes to a close, I hope you've gained valuable insights from Tippie that inspire you to embrace risks in your own life and leadership, and to think about how stepping out of your comfort zone can lead to meaningful transformation. This episode of Tippie Leads was written and produced by me, Nick Westergaard, and Steve Courtwright. Special thanks to Daniel Newton and Callie Willham for being bold, speaking up, and sharing their stories. Tippie Leads is a production of the Tippie Leadership Collaborative. To learn more, go to tippie.uiowa.edu/Tippie Leads. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or coworker, or better yet, subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen. And if you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. On behalf of everyone at Tippie, thanks for listening, and go Hawks!